In the endless silence of Africa, long before history began, a creature stood on its feet. It was neither an animal nor a human as we know it today, but something had awakened behind its eyes: curiosity. A new world opened before it. As it straightened, it found itself beyond fear. It could see farther, sense danger sooner, discover opportunity better. Its hands were free, hands that would one day make the world. But there was still no fire to light the nights. There was still no tool to shape the future. Only rough stones and bones pooled from the heart of death. Yet, there was a spark in its mind. A spark that would later change the earth. In those days, life meant fear. Every dawn a new battle. Every night a desire to survive. Giant predators like saber-toothed tigers and giant hyenas cast a permanent shadow over their lives. They looked at us and knew our weakness. But our ancestors looked at them too, not just with fear, but with learning. The more they looked, the more they understood. The more they imitated, the more intelligent they became. A brain that grew larger with each generation was writing a story whose ending was still unknown. Life was in small groups, families held together not by the love we have today, but by the need to survive. They spoke with gestures, with looks, with short breaths. There was no language, but there was communication. When a child cried in its mother's arms, everyone was worried. The sound of crying meant the sound of death. So they learned silence, the silence in which the meaning of life was formed. And one day, a trembling hand broke a stone. A sharp edge appeared. A pain settled on the finger. But at that moment, something was born: hope. From then on, man did not just run away. He resisted. He hunted. He changed the law of war. Food increased, so did the brain. It was as if meat was the fuel of human thought. Perhaps none of them knew why they stared at the sky, but every night when the stars twinkled, they felt that there were things they did not see, questions that had not yet been born. Why are we alive? Where did we come from? Where will we go? These questions were not yet answered, but they had begun. The earth changed many times. The rains took everything away. The frosts froze the bones. Many perished, but not us. It was as if fate had something to do with us. Maybe because we were learning. Maybe because we didn't let go of each other. Maybe because that spark in our heads wouldn't go out. Every wound was a lesson. Every fall was a bridge. Every death was a guide. Our steps carried us forward, always towards the unknown. The greatest war in human history still had no weapons. Our first enemy was hunger. Whoever had a fuller stomach had more time to live. But man understood that being together was security. Together, hands are stronger. Together, fear is smaller. Together, man finds meaning. At night, they gathered together, listening to the sounds of darkness. The howling of wolves echoed in the air like a war drum. But humans sat together. The hearts that beat fast were like the knocking of doors that were to become civilization one day. The moon stood high and was silent. The stars wrote paths in the sky. It was as if the world was waiting for someone to understand it, and that someone was human. Our story had just begun. Days passed in search, and nights in fear. But in the midst of this endless cycle, man gradually discovered something that no creature before him had dared to approach: the unknown. He stepped into places that even great hunters avoided, in the heart of tall grasslands, in the shadows of old trees, in dark caves that smelled of dampness and old bones. In the darkness of the cave, it seemed as if the walls were breathing. Every drop of water that dripped from the ceiling was a reminder of a time longer than all their lives. Man felt for the first time that he was not alone in this world. Something deeper and more unknown was hidden in the heart of nature. Perhaps this feeling was the first spark of faith, a silent faith that there was a force greater than the eye could see. But nature was always cruel. When there was a drought, the earth would spit everything out of man's mouth. When there was torrential rain, the paths would be washed away and memories would be lost. At such times, groups would migrate. Migration meant the hope of finding life. Migration meant moving, even when your strength was at its end. Children in their mother's arms, with eyes tired of the world, without knowing why they had to go. They only knew that they had to survive. But the elderly walked more slowly. They were the first storytellers of humanity, keepers of experiences. Everything they had seen was recorded in their eyes. If they fell, thousands of years of knowledge would fall with them. Some nights the sky was full of light. Lightning would split the sky in two. Man was afraid of the light, but he could not take his eyes off it. In the heart of that fear, respect was formed. And from the heart of respect, a future called fire was born, although not yet today. As generations passed, faces changed. If we saw our distant ancestors right now, we might have a hard time believing that we were from the same family. But there is something in their eyes that is in common with ours. No one wanted to be a loser in life. In the heart of the days when the sun sharpened and shortened the shadows, young men went out to hunt. They had learned that animals are always stronger, but not always smarter. There was no more running until the last moment. The ambush began. The planning began. A simple thought: if we tire the animal, we will win. And that was the moment when man realized that his mind was a weapon. The hunt was successful, and each time meat entered their bodies, their brains received fresh food to grow. They did not know why they became more alert, why they learned faster. But nature knew. Nature silently led man towards an unimaginable future. Men and women worked side by side. No one was a ruler, no one was a slave. Everyone had an equal share in hope. Sometimes they would sit next to the lifeless body of a member of the group and look into its motionless eyes. An exceptional moment. Man realized that death was the end, but his heart did not want to accept it. That was why, for the first time, sadness took shape in the human being. Longing, belonging, loss. Concepts that no animal understands, but man lives with. Perhaps it was in this sadness that we looked up to the sky and asked, "Is there a place for us after death?" A simple question that, thousands of years later, created religion, philosophy, and art. Nature made our bodies, but these same questions made our souls. In those distant ages, our ancestors did not know that their silent steps would one day reach busy streets, tall cities, and iron skyscrapers. They had only one goal: to survive until tomorrow. And with each tomorrow that came, a newer and more prepared human being was created for the future. Our story continues, still in the midst of danger, still on the path of growth.
And the world gradually realized that a new leadership for this planet was emerging, and its name was human.
The morning came that changed everything. The Earth had not yet awakened when a group of primitive men moved in shadows through the grass. The air was cool, and the smell of moisture settled on their sunburned skins. They were looking for a herd of deer, food that could give them life for several days. They no longer hunted by instinct alone. They had a plan that could only come from a mind that had learned from experience. One would run ahead and show himself. The other would approach from the sides. The animal's fear was man's greatest weapon. As the deer ran towards the precipice in terror, the men waited on the cliff top. All it took was a moment for the animals to make a mistake, and that almost always happened. The ground shook. The sound of falling rocks echoed. When the dust settled, a large prey lay motionless at the bottom of the cliff. Victory. Food. Life. Their joyous voices were lost in the heart of nature. But this joy was fleeting. The smell of blood. The smell of death. This smell also signaled other enemies. Wolves. Hyenas. And sometimes something even more terrifying than any known animal. Another tribe. They knew that if they hesitated for a moment, it would all be over. So they quickly prepared stones and sharp sticks. For the first time, man defended the right of his prey. There, next to the warm corpse of the animal, a new violence was born within humanity. A violence that would later shape wars, borders, and history. A stone strike, a fierce roar, a bloody wound. But the humans were not defeated. They defeated their enemies with trembling hands but a will greater than their bodies. The sun had not yet set when the meat of the hunt was divided among the members of the group. This division created an unwritten law. Whoever tries gets a share. And this became the first foundation of human justice. At night, when everyone was full, a sense of peace fell on their minds like a warm blanket. But in the heart of one of the young men, a new feeling was formed. Pride of victory. He believed that perhaps he could be a leader. Perhaps he could give orders. And this feeling was the first seed of power, the foundation of rulers, kings, and even dictators. There was no fire yet, but the humans gathered together to keep the warmth of the hunted animal. They pulled the skins over their shoulders. Animal skin became the first clothing of man, a clothing that was not for beauty, but for survival. On that dark night, a child clung to his mother's arms and looked at the stars with shining eyes. Perhaps in his eyes, he saw a future that no one else could see. A future in which humans would build houses, learn languages, write history. But there, under the endless sky of Africa, everything was just beginning. Generations came and went, one after another. But each generation a little different, a little smarter. A small mutation, just a subtle change in the brain. And the day came when man became not only a hunter of nature, but a hunter of his own destiny. This was no longer just life. This was the beginning of man's triumph over fear. And our story grew bigger and more dangerous every moment.
The next morning, while the sun was still hidden behind the trees, the group set off again. No one in the cruel world of that time had peace for 2 days in a row. Children were slow and mothers were always worried, but they knew that movement was life. To stand still was to become prey. Along the way, the youngest hunter of the